about the initializer method in Python. Well, if you know C++ or Java, then this method is also known as constructor method. So, an initializer method, or you can say a constructor, is a special kind of method that Python calls when it instantiates an object using the definitions found in your class. Python relies on the constructor to perform tasks such as initializing, that is, assigning values to any instance variable that the object will need when it starts. Constructors can also verify that there are enough resources for the object and perform any other startup task that you can think of. So the name of a constructor is always the same, that is init. The constructor can accept arguments when necessary to create the object. When you create a class without a constructor, Python automatically creates a default constructor for you that doesn't do anything. Every class must have a constructor even if it simply relies on the default constructor. So a Python class constructor is the first piece of code to be executed when you create a new object of a class. So as soon as you create a new object, the constructor method is called. And the constructor method can be used to put values in the member variables. You may also print messages in the constructor to be confirmed whether the object has been created or not. So now let's do an example. So for this, just minimize the slides and open your PyCharm. So first of all, I'm going to make a class and I'm going to name it as ABC or XYZ. And now in this class, I'm going to make the initializer method or a constructor. So we type here def like we do while making functions, and then the name of this initializer function is _init and then _ once again, and then obviously the self argument. Now let's say that this constructor method will print something out on the console screen like the object has been successfully created. Now I'm going to make an instance of this class. So I'm going to name this instance as A and put it equal to XYZ. Now as soon as I create an instance, basically this method gets called and this will print out this thing out on the console screen. So basically as soon as you create an object, the initializer function, or you can say a constructor, gets called. So now when I run it, it should print this thing out on the console screen. So run and see that we have this thing out on the console screen. Now we can pass arguments like we pass arguments to a function. So let's say that we pass some kind of string, and the string is the object has been created successfully. And now this argument will be passed in, let's say, a variable known as object. And now since I have passed this string to this parameter object, so now I can print out this thing. So print object, and now when I run it, I will have the same output, and yes, I have the same output. So basically as soon as you create an object, the initializer function gets called and it executes whatever is inside it. So even if you don't create this initializer function, Python will automatically call it, but it will then do nothing. But we can make initializer function to do things like initializing variables and object creations, and we can verify that our object has been created successfully or not. So this is all I need to teach you about the constructor method, or you can say initializer method. So if you have any questions, docstring in Python. So in this tutorial, you will learn what is a docstring, how it is useful, and how it is different from commands. So a Python docstring is a string used to document a Python module, class, function, or method. So programmers can understand what it does without having to read the details of the implementation. Python documentation string, or in short you can say docstrings, provide a convenient way of associating documentation with Python modules, functions, classes, and methods. As you can see, even for relatively simple function, documenting using comments quickly makes it unpleasant and difficult to read. So to solve this, the docstring was introduced. A docstring is simply a multi-line string that is not assigned to anything. It is specified in a source code that is used to document a specific segment of code. Unlike conventional source code comments, the docstring should describe what the function does, not how. So the general rule is that docstring must be defined with 3 double quotes. No blank lines should be left before or after the docstring. The text starts in the next line after the opening quotes, and the closing quotes have their own line, means that they are not at the end of the last sentence. The docstring line should begin with a capital letter and end with a period. So just keep this thing in mind that a docstring always begins with a capital letter and it always ends with a period. The first line should be a short description, and if there are more than one line in the documentation string, the second line should be blank, visually separating the summary from the rest of the description. The following lines should be one or more paragraphs describing the object calling convention, its side effect, etc. Now I have told you how to declare a docstring. A docstring is declared using the triple double quotes just below the class, method, or function declaration. All functions should have a docstring. And now in order to access docstring, we can use the method doc of the object or using the help function. So this is what I have told you already. So let's move on to the next slide. Now there are 2 types of docstring, one-line docstring and multi-docstring. Now a one-line docstring are for really obvious cases. They should really fit on one line. Depending on the complexity of the code, method, or class being written, a one-line docstring may be perfectly appropriate. For example, we have the function here sum, and the docstring will be return argument value add to arg value 2. Return arg1 value add to arg2 value. So right after the function definition, we have a docstring which is actually describing the purpose of this function in a single line. Now what is a multi-docstring? A multi-line docstring consists of a summary line just like a one-line docstring followed by a blank line followed by a more elaborate description. The summary line may be on the same line as the opening quotes or on the next line. So you can see that we have a function here, and in this docstring we are actually specifying the purpose of this function. So there is basically a difference between commenting versus documentation. So in general, commenting is describing your code for developers, or you can say to developers. The intended main audience is the maintainers and developers of the Python code. In conjunction with the well-written code, comments help to guide the reader to better understand your code and its purpose and design. Documenting code is describing its use and functionality to your user. While it may be helpful in the development process, the main intended audience is the user. Now what is a class docstring? A class docstring are created for the class itself as well as any class methods. The docstring are placed immediately following the class or class method intended by one level. So here you can see that we have a class, and then we have the docstring of this class which is actually describing the purpose of this class, and then we have a function, and then we have a docstring of this function as well, which is actually describing the function of this method. So class docstring should contain the following information: a brief description of its purpose and behavior, any public methods along with a brief description, any class properties, anything related to the interface for subclasses if the class is intended to be subclassed. The class constructor parameters should be documented within the init class method docstring. Well, I think that we haven't covered yet, but we will cover it in the future tutorials. Individual methods should be documented using their individual docstring. Class method docstring should contain the following: a brief description of what the method is and what it is used for, any argument, both required and optional, that are passed, including keyword argument, label any argument that are considered optional or have a default value, any side effect that occur when executing the method, any exception that are raised, any restriction on when the method can be called. Now, variable docstring. Python actually don't support directly docstring on variables. There is no attribute that can be attached to variable and retrieved interactively like the doc attribute on modules, classes, and functions. While the language doesn't support directly provides for them, there is one doc which is known as epdoc support variable docstring if a variable assignment statement is immediately followed by a paired string literal. Then that assignment is treated as a docstring for that variable. In classes, variable assignments at the class definition level are considered class variables, and assignments to instance variable in the constructors are considered instance variable. So you can see that we have a class and then we have a variable, and then we have the variable docstring for that variable, which is actually describing the purpose of this variable. So now, how can we access docstring? Well, I've told you that we can access a docstring using the doc method, but you will come to know how can we access a docstring when I access it in my code. So now let's move on to coding. So open your PyCharm, and now first of all, I'm going to make a class, and I'm going to name it as ABC XYZ. You can name it anything you want. And now I can have a docstring in triple quotation mark, and now the first letter of a docstring must be a capital letter. So let's say that the purpose of this class is this class will perform, let's say, addition and subtraction. And now in this class I will have two methods, addition, and then this method will take two arguments, let's say a and b. And now the docstring for this function will be, let's say, this method is intended to perform addition. And now let's say that this will print a plus b. Now let's say that I have another function, def multiplication, and it also takes two arguments. Now the docstring for this function will be, let's say, this method is intended to perform multiplication, and do not forget to add a period at the end of the docstring. So add a period here and add a period here as well. Now I'm going to make Now you cannot access comments, but you can access docstring. So let's say that you have 100 functions in your code, and each function has a specific purpose which is described by docstring, and you want to know the functionality of only one method. So let's say that I want to know the functionality of this method. So what I can do is that I can say print, and then I need to type the name of the function whose functionality or docstring I want to print. So I will type the function name, which is addition, and then I will use double underscore, and then I will type doc, and then double underscore once again. And why it is leaving a red line under it? Because I need to define this print statement inside the class, and it is still leaving a red line under it. So addition double underscore doc double underscore, it's fine. Maybe I need to put addition dot, and now the error is gone. And now if I run it, you can see that the docstring of this addition method is printed out on the console screen. So the docstring of this function addition is this thing, and now when I print it using this thing, it prints out this thing out on the console screen. Now you can similarly print out the docstring of multiplication as well. So multiplication, and remember not to put these round brackets, and now dot doc, and now when I run it, it has printed out the docstring of this function and this function as well. So this is how we can add docstring to our function, class and methods. Now as an assignment, make this docstring a multi-line docstring, keeping in mind the slide that we have covered. Right here. So a multi-line docstring consists of a summary line just like a one-line docstring, followed by a blank line, followed by a more elaborate description the summary line may have on the same line as the opening quotes or on the next line. So just keep in mind these three lines, and then convert the single line docstring to a multi-line docstring. So this is what I want to teach you for this tutorial.